I'll call the meeting to order, regular council meeting to order. Just as a procedural issue, I am in a location that while I've been on Zoom all day in meetings from this location, it'll be the first test. We're testing it in the evening, so I don't know what the Wi-Fi load might be. So Councillor Vic is the acting mayor. If for some reason I do drop off or lose connectivity, Councillor Vic will take the meeting over. I will not be attempting to come back in on Wi-Fi in order to chair. I'll just simply dial in to the meeting. So if for some reason my Wi-Fi does not work, the acting mayor will take over the chair and I will just come in on a dial-in basis and just be a participant. And Councillor Vic is aware of that and has had an opportunity to prepare for that. Hopefully, no issues all day. And like I say, I was in meetings all day today with it, so I don't suspect there should be any issues, but we all know that streaming starts happening in the evenings. So who knows what may happen. With that, we do recognize that we meet on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE Nation, where the city of Quesnel rests. The agenda, I believe, Ms. Hartley, there's no changes or additions to the agenda?
No, none that I'm aware of.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Rund, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg, second. Anyone opposed? That motion has passed. And adoption of the regular meeting minutes of our last electronic council meeting. Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Goulet, second. Anyone opposed to that or have any comments? Councillor Paul, did you catch us on anything this meeting? No? Okay, good. No council reports or discussion items, no committee reports. So we move straight into staff reports, starting off with Manager Robinson on a potential intern position. So Aaron, if you can pop on and join us. There you are.
There I am. Hello, good evening. I had no idea I'd be up this quickly. Thank you. So everyone can hear me okay? Okay. The purpose of this report is to inform council of an internship that we have secured from now in April until September of this year. The Forestry Initiatives program has been successful in our application to My Tax Canada to host an intern, Adinda Herdianti, from University of British Columbia. Adinda will spend 6 months in total on the project, 2 months living in Quesnel. In this time, she will help us understand how interactions within the Quesnel Forestry Network can bring new and innovative manufacturing opportunities to our community. Building on the manufacturing work done to date, Adinda will conduct interviews with small, medium, and large industry players to map out how they interact with one another and also identify where new players could potentially get involved or understand the barriers that stop new players from engaging. It's important to note, my final point, that this intern is part of the UBC group of researchers that visited our city last fall. And several of the researchers besides Adinda will be returning in the coming months to help us contribute to that foundational work for pivoting the forest sector.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Manager Robinson? So Aaron, I do have one. Could you talk just a little bit about how this will help us with some of the work that Lacey's been doing? Because we've been doing some broad-based work on manufacturing opportunities. And I saw some notes today about small, medium-sized enterprises. So how will this intern articulate with work that we already have on the go? And then some of the questions we've got around the community forest, bringing the aspen fiber or deciduous fiber on stream, et cetera. Will there be an opportunity for interplay around that too?
Yeah, sure. So Adinda, because she's a PhD student, she'll really be focusing on a small piece of mapping what the network looks like, but it will be part of our larger manufacturing, the structural manufacturing report and the biochemical report that we have from the manufacturing side. And it will also relate to the work we're doing with small and medium enterprise to basically just identify opportunities. And then, sorry, what was your second question there?
No, that's it,
Oh,
because you
the
picked
the
up the
ask
community
for
forestry. Yeah.
forest. Yeah, and so the idea is the work that Lacey's been doing with the First Nations for different types of biomass utilization. This will also feed into that to understand, you know, where those gaps are in the market with supply and what new bolt-on industries could be, you know, added onto, or is there a new thing that people haven't identified yet? This would be the opportunity to find out where those cracks are, basically.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. And for council's edification, we also had a presentation just regarding some of the potentials for adding more value, another research study that was done. And they were looking at value added, parallel industries, value added in beer, value added in coffee, and what did it mean in terms of lessons that we need to learn about value added in industry. So, I won't admit that I've drunk a lot of beer and coffee since that presentation, all of those specialty beers and specialty coffees. But it was actually a very interesting conversation simply because there was a different way of looking at how we position ourselves and how we market ourselves and get into those niche markets. So every one of these kinds of studies, I think, is helping us to understand better how we can rethink forestry in Quesnel, and particularly on the manufacturing side. So I think this is great. If there's no further questions, this is an information only item for council. Great. Thank you, Aaron, and thanks for the continued work on our forestry initiatives. Okay, the next is the UBCM Strengthening Communities Services Grant application, and Lindsay is joining us.
Yeah, thank you. The purpose of this report is to gain council's approval to submit an application to the UBCM Strengthening Communities Services Grant Program. So this project is aimed at supporting unsheltered homeless populations and addressing community impacts. It's a 1-year fully funded project that has many interrelated components, which will be coordinated through a 1-year contracted community social coordinator position. Tangible aspects of the project include the 1-year contracted coordinator, and they'll do all the project coordination, strengthen local connections and partnerships, liaise with community groups, create community outreach and public education, social media, and communications. Other aspects include honoraria for elders or those with lived experience, incremental increases to the clean team, the introduction of a day laborer program, communications and social media campaigns to increase public education and to decrease stigma and discrimination, a mobile laundry, shower, washroom unit, or the renovations to an existing building in the community, which will include shower, storage, and laundry. Locker units, which will be installed in buildings around the area. Location is to be decided. 2 new outhouses to be placed in the community, and training and education programs for both community members and city staff. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, and I think it is good to pause at this point prior to going into the recommendation and see if council's got questions or comments. I'm going to start it off by saying this is one of the weirdest grants that I think we've ever seen from the government. We're not going to say no to some money, but it's strange on a number of fronts. And I want to give kudos to Lindsay and Tanya and Amy and others who had a hand in trying to sort out the best way we could potentially take advantage of this situation. It's strange in that it's one of the first ones I've ever seen in backdating. You can backdate charges, and I think it's to try and assist communities like Penticton and others who had to step in because of extremist situations. And it's also strange in the fact that it just emphasizes over and over and over and over again that it's for temporary. It's for temporary. So what staff, as we looked at this and struggled with it, we thought, because there's one bullet in it that says that you can book some staff time, if a staff person has picked up some of this responsibilities, or if you're doing some work in that social planning domain. And so that's really one of the key aspects of this that you see as the first bullet. If we could get some social planning coordination capacity to really try and understand and drive this and coordinate it a little bit better with all of the not-for-profits, it would add value to all the things we're already doing. The situation table's been launched, the work we're doing on housing, the work we're doing with the RCMP on street outreach, the work we're doing with bylaw. So that's one of the key ones. And then I've had conversations with Chief Stump because some of this temporary things, especially for in the winter, we get a lot of folks coming in from NASCO and they come in on the bus, they don't have a place to go. We actually heard that from the Downtown Association where they were struggling a little bit because they were seeing people who were not homeless, they weren't vagrants, they were just in town for a little while and had no place to go. And when we hit that cold spell, you know, some of the business owners were feeling like they really wanted to invite them in and have them, you know, sit in their place to get warm. So part of the, you know, what's embedded in here is trying to find the opportunity to deal with that. Chief Stump also said that some people coming in on medical appointments end up stranded in Quesnel for hours too, because their medical van will go up to Prince George. So they'll drop the folks in Quesnel. They may only have a half-hour appointment, but they have to wait for the medical van to come back from whatever they've done up in Prince George. So that's kind of part of the dialogue that Tanya and I have been having regarding this. And then Lindsay, an update for you. One of my meetings today was with folks around the Foundry program, that proactive preventative approach to youth services. And council may remember, we weren't successful as a community in the last go around on the Foundry program, but the Child Development Center has indicated they would be a lead agency this time, which is something we were missing last time. And there's a lot of work being done, taking a look at the ones who were successful in smaller communities and how we can mirror our next application on the basis of those successful communities and learn from them. So again, having a social planning coordinator, the timing may be good to also help with some of the work that will need to be done on that, because we've talked as a council, we would like to see more energy going into the proactive preventative piece of this, as well as the harm reduction piece and the just-in-time services. So as I said, it's a bit of a strange grant, but kudos to Lindsay, Amy, Tanya, and others who pulled something together here, and hopefully, you know, we're able to be successful with this. So with that, open the floor for any questions or comments on the grant application. Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. So this is rather good timing when we talk about some of the issues that we are facing as a community and how our staff are struggling to pull all these pieces together off the side of their desk, considering all the other pieces that they're doing. And I look at our planning department, for example, and some of the work that she's doing and how she's got her fingers in a lot of other pieces around the social piece. So I think the planning of, or the timing of this grant, if we get it, is really, really good for our community. And I think it's that stopgap right now for things that we are feeling the pinch in. So I for one will be supporting this recommendation.
Okay, and I think I saw Councillor Vic. I think you noted, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to echo the comments from Councillor Rudenberg, and I'll just add that a lot of these ideas I see in this proposal can alleviate a difficult situation that we find ourselves in when it comes to vulnerable persons. And I really think that, you know, if we're at point A and we want to get to point B and have it reduce some of the issues, I see that there is an opportunity to do that with a lot of these concepts. And to that end, I've had some good dialogue with the Downtown Association, and they're completely on board with this plan. And in fact, it was voted today that they're going to be sending a letter of support. So anything to help alleviate some of the critical social issues we're having, really think this is going to help, and definitely support this. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this one is interesting. It's very different. But, you know, I think once staff digs in and gets a little bit more clarity on what's going on, that'll be helpful too. I'm interested in where we're going to land in a year. and what kind of how people will be looking for this to be kept up, if at all possible, right? So whether we're going to continue on with a coordinator, whether we're going to continue on with a mobile laundry, shower, the outhouses location. I mean, these are what we've been talking about before. So, I mean, all positives for a year for sure, but I think we could be looking at how we, keep these things up after a year, because people may come to expect them.
Yeah, we're very cognizant of that. I think you've pointed to something that is going to make other communities very reticent to get involved in this. And I think, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very clear in the grant, it's been a while since I read it, no ongoing operating commitments from the province. I mean, that was part of the kind of the weirdness, temporary and definitely no ongoing commitments. Am I remembering it right, Lindsay?
Yeah, and not just from the province. They don't want any ongoing financial obligations for the municipality from this project. And that's why we had trouble trying to fit pieces into the project that would help us long-term as well as short-term.
Yeah. So with respect to Councillor Elliott, your comment, for example, a mobile facility or another facility that deals with the showers and the washrooms and storage, etc., we're very cognizant of the fact that it has to be designed in a way that somebody's going to pick it up, right? Otherwise we would look at it, maybe map it out, but not pull the trigger to make it happen if we don't have an entity that's going to follow through on that. So I think the key for this for council is the planning coordinator. If we can get the planning coordinator, we have a sense of the other needs that we would like to address on this, with the proviso, as the grant indicates, that somebody else, if we equip them with the capital and with the ability to deliver the program, somebody else is picking it up long term. Okay. Anything else on this? Okay, Lindsay, if I can get you to put forward the recommendation then.
That Quesnel City Council supports the application to the Union of BC Municipalities for up to $450,000 for the Union of BC Municipalities Strengthening Community Services Grant for the Strengthening Quesnel's Homelessness Services Project and its proposed activities under the Strengthening Community Services Program. And that Quesnel City Council commits to providing overall grant management for this program.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Runge, Councillor Vick, second. Any further questions or comments? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion's passed unanimously. Thank you again, Lindsay, and to the staff members who put this grant together.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Mr. Norburn for the lease for Shiraoi House.
Thank you. Yeah, the purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to enter into a 5-year lease with Moonshine Coffee Limited for the use of the upper level of Shiraoi House. So the Shiraoi Twinning Society decided that they no longer wanted to hold the license of occupation they had with the city for a number of years for the upper level of Shiraoi House. And as a result, the agreement was terminated May 31st, 2019 at their request. Since June 1st, 2019, the city has made Shiraoi House available for hourly and daily rentals. However, the building has been largely underutilized. The city hired Peak Solutions to complete a business plan for Shiraoi House that included researching opportunities for better utilization of the building. The study identified multiple revenue generating uses for Shiraoi House, including renovating the space for diverse commercial use and lease opportunities, with a coffee shop being ranked as the highest potential use. At the October 25th, 2020 council meeting, council directed staff to advertise the opportunity to lease Shiraoi House for a term of up to 5 years for the purpose of operating a business or nonprofit at that location. Council further directed that the business or nonprofits that align with the park zoning and the city's strategic plan and who are able to pay market rent be given preference. Economic development staff issued an expression of interest, which resulted in the city staff entering into negotiations with Moonshine Coffee Limited to lease the space. Moonshine Coffee Limited, if you're not familiar with them, is a local business who would like to lease the upper level of Shiraoi House to operate a coffee roasting business, a food and beverage cafe, and a community gathering place that supports small local vendors and artisans. This purpose aligns with the park zoning and with the city's strategic plan. In advance of establishing a lease for Shiraoi House, the city successfully applied for an NDI grant to renovate the space and make it more suitable for use by a commercial tenant. The renovation plan includes gas line improvements and extension, electrical and plumbing upgrades for broader commercial use, Wi-Fi and USB upgrades, provision of exterior patio heat and light, and interior renovations, including the removal of a wall and flooring installation. The renovations are currently underway and expected to be completed by mid to late May. Staff have negotiated an agreement with Moonshine Coffee Limited that is based on similar agreements the city has with commercial tenants in city-owned buildings. The lease agreement is for a 5-year term commencing June 1st, 2021, with a cancellation clause that allows for termination of the agreement with 2 months' notice and a renewal clause that provides the option of an additional 5-year term. The lease rate is based on a commercially competitive market rate of $10 per square foot per year, and an annual increase in rent is included based on the increase year to year in the BC Consumer Price Index. Now, sort of one additional item is late in the negotiating process. Moonshine Coffee did ask if the city would consider a reduction or a waiving of the rent for the first up to 6 months, simply because they're a new venture in a new unproven location, and that this is something that some landlords have provided to new tenants to help ensure their success. The benefits potentially benefits the city in that we have a shared or mutual interest in this business being successful at this location. This is a new venture in this location. If council is receptive, staff suggest perhaps a 3-month 50% waiving of, or 50% reduction in fee, just to help the new business get off and running in this location.
Okay, so before we get into the last point, let's actually deal with the lease and the recommendation around the lease. So before we go to that recommendation, and then we can deal with, as a landlord, what's the landlord-tenant relationship around starting a new business up during COVID. So any questions or comments about the lease itself before we get into the recommendation for entering into the lease? Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, Director Norburn. Number 10 on the lease rate rent, page 21 of 65. It says the tenant will be responsible for a pro rata share of property taxes. And then in parentheses, it says, if applicable. When would it not be applicable that they pay their portion of property taxes, which is pretty common?
Yeah, so, and we use that language fairly often. Sometimes a tenant doesn't think that they will be required to pay property taxes. What happens is the Director of Finance or the Finance Department for the city will notify BC Assessment that we have a commercial tenant. Likely they won't have to pay property taxes for 2021 because the year's already started. So once that information is provided to BC Assessment, then they will process it. I sort of indicated to the tenant that they can probably expect that they will have to start paying property taxes in 2022.
Or their share of the property taxes.
Their share of
Yeah.
it.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarity, because this is sometimes confusing for everybody, it's not our determination, it's BC Assessment's determination. Right? So it's not as if we waiving property taxes, etc. We would, if property taxes were applicable by BC Assessment and we wanted to waive them, that's a different question. The way the lease is written is if BC Assessment says that they have to be charged.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the lease itself? Councillor Runch.
Sorry. Yeah, I do have one question with regards to, because it's a 5-year lease, should there be any maintenance costs on the outside that are, would those maintenance costs be shared by the tenant on a pro rata basis with regards to the building then?
What types of maintenance do you mean?
I'm thinking roofing.
I think the roofing would be, it's a good example of something that we could have explicitly stated that would likely fall to the city as the landlord to make sure that the roof is in, good repair, doesn't leak. Yeah. So the spirit and the intent is that the city would be responsible for major maintenance. So I mean, if a air handling unit breaks down or the roof fails or leaks, then that's something, the fire alarm panel goes. something that would be a significant capital expense for the building itself. The tenant is responsible for all the regular maintenance, changing light bulbs, minor repairs, that kind of thing that would happen to the building.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the lease itself? Seeing none, Councillor or Director Norburn, just take us through the recommendation then.
Okay, well, the recommendation as written is that we accept here just a second, I got to pull it up because I have so the recommendation as written is that council enter into the attached 5-year lease with Moonshine Coffee Limited for the use of the upper level of Shiraoi House in Labore Park, and that the mayor and corporate administrator be authorized to execute such documentation as required to complete the agreement. And again, just to be clear, the tenant has agreed to the terms that are in there. She has also sort of requested that we consider.
Yeah, so we get that, Director Norburn. There's two separate legal items. Two separate items. One is the legal item of the lease as written. So if she's accepted the lease as written, council has to deal with the lease as written. We can then deal with whether, what council wants to do on the waiving or the rent relief for COVID. So let's deal with the actual lease itself. Okay, so Councillor Elliott so moved. Is that right? Is that what I'm seeing? Okay, seconder, please. Councillor Vic. Any further questions or comments just on the lease as written? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's passed unanimously. So now there's a request as we enter into this lease, as Director Norburn's indicated, for some rent relief. And I believe Director Norburn's correct. I've heard of other landlords that have given pretty substantive relief in some cases, particularly around fledgling, businesses. It's the worst possible time in many regards to start up. So what's the will or pleasure of council? Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is obviously a difficult time, especially, immediately right now with the restaurants and the situations that everybody finds themselves with COVID. This is an important initiative for the business. There's no doubt about it, but I think it's also important for us with its location, with the precinct, the park, everything coming together right now. I want to see this succeed, and I would move that we go with exactly what's been asked for the 6-month waiving it. Let's get them started. Let's get them established and help them out any way we can for the betterment of them and also ourselves.
So before we go into motions, let's just hear what the will of council is now, rather than getting a motion on the floor that's this discreet and then having to walk it back. So what's the thought of council? Councillor Runge?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I do understand they're difficult times for businesses. I think this lease rate is already actually quite favorable. When I was looking at leases down on Reed Street, many of them are much, much higher. So I actually would be against giving that 6-month rent relief. My fear is that if we're giving 6-month rent relief for a person who's just going in, the question is, I just don't feel comfortable with that. We want a strong business to go in here. We want a business that's comfortable. If they're asking for rent relief from day one, that for me is a little bit worrying. So having heard what I just heard, I'd vote against this motion.
Well, there is no motion, so I want to be crystal clear, Councillor Runge. There's no motion on the floor. Okay.
Let me correct.
Councillor Paul.
So I'd be against that.
Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I know that there's no motion on the floor, but I would echo Councillor Runge's point, particularly in view, and I find this a little bit odd, that the tenant is actually getting water and sewer at no charge, so they're already getting a break.
Okay, any other thoughts from Councillor Vic?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I would split the difference on the ideas before us. Director Norburn suggested 90 days at half rent. It's not uncommon for landlords to give a fixturing period of 60 days. And definitely COVID has exacerbated issues for startups, and many businesses have benefited from up to 90 days of rent reduction from landlords. So I would say what we might consider a 90-day period of no rent.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
It's just not splitting the difference though.
No.
90 days.
Well, technically 3 months is what Councillor Vic is suggesting, as opposed to 6 months.
I'm sorry. Yep. Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Which I believe Councillor or Director Norburn, you indicated a 3 months in your comments, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. So my own comment is along the lines of Councillor Elliott. For us, we've kind of invited somebody to take an adventure with us in repurposing a building that has been grossly underutilized for a long time, and to see where our community is at with respect to broadening the geographic area that people are going to be having access to, coffees or ice creams or whatever the case may be. To Councillor Runge's point, this is a coffee roasting company that's now extending its business into the delivery of the drinks, the food, and all of that stuff in a specific location. And as Councillor Norburn, why did I keep calling you Councillor? Are you running in the next election or something? That, like, is it stuck in my head? Anyway, Director Norburn indicated the particular business is also interested in exploring it being a bit of a gathering place and a bit of a display place for some of the cultural aspects in our community too, whether it's artisans or art or whatever the case may be. So my inclination is to actually look at what is the net gain in that location for a business, meeting our transition strategy needs, meeting our desire to be a fun, interesting community. If they got into a relationship with Barker Brewery, another place for the mountain bikers and the trail walkers and the riverfront walkers together, and then the artisans, and for a nominal amount to the ratepayers of the city to subsidize the success of the startup of that business would be, I think, to your point, Councillor Vic, a 90-day startup would be normal practice in some situations. And now we've got the COVID situation. And who knows what's going to happen with COVID going through. So the fact that this individual is going to be courageous enough to actually enter into a lease with us and start a business at this time, I think needs to be warranted. And the finances to us is so nominal, but the finances to an individual starting a business, every dollar counts, as anybody who's run a business would know. So my inclination would be to do it, for the remainder of this uncertain year of 2021. But Director Norburn has indicated the 3 months. That's the dialogue you've had with the proprietor, I understand. Is that correct?
We weren't that specific. She asked for the 6-month waiver. I think, she sort of indicated that she knows that's a lot to ask, and that may not be something that council would support. And basically, I just said that I would present that idea and that there were options, that if council felt comfortable with that, then that was something they could do. And if they didn't feel comfortable with that, then there might be some middle ground, and a lesser period of time, and maybe not a full waiver, but
yeah,
that specific.
So if I could suggest to Councillor Vic's point, an initial 3 months, 50% would be at least a start. But city manager, working with our economic development manager and the team that's been calling out, they may actually know what kinds of rent relief are being provided. I would be interested in Himalayan Kitchen, for example. They're just moving into Craig's table space. Our other landlords providing rent relief, and if we can get a sense of what the range of that rent relief is, then we could do something that's a bit more pinned to where the market is providing that relief, as opposed to just picking a number out of the air. So if we wanted to start with the 3-month 50% relief, but do a little bit of homework on what relief is being provided in the community writ large, then come back and revisit it if we're doing less than what other landlords are doing at this time. So that would be my suggestion at this point. So anybody now want to put forward a motion? Sorry, Councilor Rudenberg, I saw you for first time. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to make that motion, actually.
Okay. So a seconder to that motion then of 3 months rent relief and research on the basis of what the market rent relief is and revisit if necessary. So I saw Councilor Vic, did your hand go up for second? Any further questions or comments then now that we have a motion on the floor? Councilor Elliott and then Councilor Runch.
Okay, so just a little bit of clarity then. So we're talking about 100% off for 3 months.
50% for 3 months is what I understood was being suggested as a starting point.
Jeff, that was correct?
That was a suggestion that staff made coming
Okay.
from a conversation that I had with the city manager. That's
Okay.
What we were sort of proposing as a potential, starting place, if that's what council
Yeah.
wanted to provide some
Okay,
kind
thank you.
of relief.
I think it just shows sign of good faith on our part. We give some relief on the front end and then we'll go do some homework to see what the market's doing and then come back and revisit. Councilor Runch.
No, thank you. It was clarified there with with Councillor Elliott's question. Thank
Okay.
you very much. 50% is great.
Okay, any other comments or questions? On the motion then, everybody clear on the motion? Okay, anyone opposed? Councilor Paul's opposed. Okay, otherwise the motion passes.
And recorded, please.
Yep. Okay, next. And it's Director Norburn again.
The purpose.
Bailey Helicopters.
Okay, Bailey Helicopter. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to enter into a 5-year lease with Bailey Helicopters for the use of the office space in the operations building at the Quesnel Regional Airport. So Bailey Helicopter is interested in leasing room 105 in the operations building at the airport. The revenue generated from the lease of office space is modest, but there's considerable benefit to the airport that will be realized as a result of having Bailey Helicopter operate out of the airport, as it will generate additional air traffic movements and fuel sales. The space to be leased is approximately 12.5 square meters. Staff have negotiated an agreement with Bailey Helicopter that is based on similar agreements with other tenants at the airport. The fee for the lease space works out to $13.64 a square foot, which is comparable to other leases the city has at the airport and is considered fair market value for the space. The recommendation is that council enter into the attached 5-year lease with Bailey Helicopter for use of approximately 12.5 square meters of office space at the airport, and that the corporate administrator be authorized to execute such documentation as required to complete the agreement.
Okay. On the motion, Councilor Goulet, did I see you? Councilor Goulet, Councilor Vic, questions or comments? Councilor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you. So this is going right inside the airport to where the Skyfest booth was, or?
Sorry, no, this is not in the terminal building. This is in the, what we call the ops building or the operations building.
Gotcha, thank you.
Highland Helicopter had previously been in that space most recently.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none on the motion, anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, that motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Director Norburn. Okay, next item up, Baker Drive Sanitary Sewer Main, and Director Coben has joined us.
Thanks, Mayor. Purpose is to gain council approval to award the contract for the sewer line construction along Baker and Tingley Drive. The city has received recovery plan approval from Emergency Management BC for replacement of sanitary sewer service to a portion of Baker Drive in the areas of Tingley and Twan. 80% of the eligible costs of the overall project value of 1.28 million will be reimbursed by Emergency Management BC. 2 projects are required to facilitate this restoration, which is a lift station at the bottom of Healy Street and also a new gravity sewer line along a portion of Baker Drive to Tingley Drive. 2 bids were received for the gravity main project. Mass construction in the amount of 615,205 plus GST, and Canadian Western Mechanical in the amount of 728,150 plus GST. There will be inconveniences to motorists and major disruptions during this work on Baker Drive. It's a deep sewer main, so it will take some time for a portion of that line to be constructed. The recommendation is that council approve award of the Baker Drive sanitary upgrade to Mass Construction in the amount of $615,205 plus GST, with funding not covered or reimbursed from Emergency Management BC to come from sewer capital reserves.
So on the recommendation, Councillor Rudenberg, so moved. Councillor Elliott, second. Questions or comments? Councillor Paul.
Thank you. To Director Coben, when you say that there will be major disruptions, does that mean that that Baker Drive would be closed at certain periods of time and that people would have to make a detour around Bushy Lake?
There will be periods where that will be closed. There's a portion of the construction of the 480 meters that is in the traveled portion of the lane into town on Baker Drive. So yes, that it will be closed for a period of time. However, we are going to work with the contractor with scheduling to ensure emergency vehicles, can access it if need be. But however, yes, there's definitely going to be an inconvenience.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Sorry, I think I saw somebody. Yeah, Councillor Vic, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Coben, if I'm understanding it right, what we're voting on right now is for part 2 of the project, or the second part of it, meaning the line, I guess, the sewage line. And the first part of it would be a lift station, which is not part of this. So are we going to be coming back to this and having more disruption to do the lift station? Or is there any opportunity to try and get it done in one shot, or just trying to think how to minimize disruption here?
Yes, so the lift station, there will be no effect to residents on that for the most part. It's on Healy Street. It was tendered as a separate project just due to the nature of the work. And the project cost for that project was well under the limit to come to council for approval. It was just over $200,000 for that project. So that's already been awarded.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
thank you.
And again, just for clarification, the only reason this is in front of council because it exceeds the $500,000 capital expenditure, right? So this is a piece of repair work that's in our capital plan to repair. We've just been waiting on getting the emergency management or disaster financing approved, etc. So it's coming to us only because it exceeds the financial limit. Okay, and it's got to be repaired. So, the point taken about managing the disruption, but we can't have a above ground line for a lot longer. Okay, any other questions or comments? So on the recommendation, anyone opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Director Coben. Okay, and the next one, South Quesnel Business Improvement Area Bylaw.
So the purpose of this report is to request council to proceed with the 3rd reading of the City of Quesnel, South Quesnel Business Improvement Area Bylaw 1899 of 2021. So this bylaw is a council initiative bylaw subject to petition against. The South Quesnel BIA bylaw expired in 2020 and the group came forward with an updated strategic plan for a 2-year program. After the first 2 readings of this bylaw, staff mailed to all the businesses in the respective area the budgets and plans with an estimate of their cost and instructions for the petition. So the results of the petition are in the background section of the report. You can see we received 3 letters. So the recommendation is that council proceed with the third reading of the City of Quesnel, South Quesnel Business Improvement Area Bylaw 1899 of 2021 in the bylaw section of the agenda.
Can I have a motion? Counselor Run, so moved, seconded. Counselor Vic, any questions or comments? Counselor Paul.
Thank you. Just a question. I'm sure I know the answer to this, but if someone wanted to opt out of a BIA, that's a lot more difficult than opting in. Am I correct?
They have no ability to opt in out.
No.
It's a group. Yeah.
So these letters that are attached are rather redundant.
No, because it's an alternate approval process, just like our referendum
So
alternate approval process.
Okay, so if there were letters that aggregated to more than 50% of the assessed value, then that would be a different story.
Oh, just to be
Director
clear,
Bolton. Yeah.
Even if it's under 50%, council still makes the final decision. This is just council's way of seeing what the area thinks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And we are still doing work with the South Quesnel Business Association, and just a reminder that, you know, council said only for 2 years. The South Quesnel Business Association has some work to do to align itself and its activities with the intention of these business improvement areas. And so we're going to be working hard with them particularly on the front end as they do a bit of a reset. So I've offered a meeting in dialogue with some of their executive members where we would bring our staff. I would attend as well. We would talk through our transition strategy. We would talk through our capital plan, and we would talk through some options of melding the overarching transition strategy, you know, our vision for the community, our brand for the community, with some potential capital projects up in their area that might be eligible for partnership funding, Northern Trust funding, etc. So we're hoping that we should be able to have a meeting to that effect and really have a bit of a meeting of the minds and brainstorming session in May. But one of the reasons that this is only 2 years is to partly parallel what the Downtown Association is doing, because it's a time of transition, but also the request was for the full term. And we've said, let's do 2 years and make sure that, you know, we're comfortable with how this business association is operating. Okay, so the motion is on the floor. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is passed unanimously. Okay, moving on. The expansion of outdoor cafe area, Director Turner, pop on. There you are.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to review the proposed expansion of the outdoor cafe area as described in the outdoor cafe bylaw, and also to consider the first 3 readings of the amendment bylaw. The outdoor cafe bylaw 1866 was adopted in April 2019. The reason we did that revision was to expedite the process for outdoor cafes, as well as reduce the cost of outdoor cafes, as council was really looking for staff to encourage and expand the number of outdoor cafes in our downtown. The owner of the Tower Inn at 500 Reed is now requesting that the frontage along Reed Street be extended to include his hotel, so that he can have an outdoor cafe in that area. If the outdoor cafe bylaw is amended to include this area, Begbie's Restaurant intends on applying for a large-scale patio cafe that would be sited on Reed Street and occupy 1 parallel parking stall, as well as install bistro tables and chairs on their portion of the private property. You'll see that we've already given them approval to go ahead with those outdoor seats on their private area, given the COVID situation. We've encouraged them to go ahead and do that. But this clarifies that process, as well as allows them for that large scale outdoor cafe once this bylaw is approved. So the recommendation is that council considers the first 3 readings of the outdoor cafe amendment bylaw number 1908 in the bylaw section of the agenda.
Okay, on the recommendation, Councillor Run, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg, second. Any questions or comments?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, I think the more the merrier, and if this can be accommodated, then, you know, between Granville's on one block, this, and then hopefully at some point, Mr. Mikes will come around and add something there, the cafe at the bakery. I think it's great. It's what we envisioned for Reed Street, to try and enable this, and so COVID just giving us a good shove out the door on it. Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I totally agree. I'd like to see Mr. Mikes get out there as well. But is this the way it's written, carved in stone on just the one parking stall? If they move out there and they wanted to expand, they thought maybe it was a bit too small, can they take up the second one, or?
They would have the same abilities as the bylaw, and that, in my recollection, it's 2. So that would be, it would be 2.
Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor. Any further questions or comments? Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, that motion's passed unanimously. Thank you, Director Turner. Okay, moving on to correspondence. The Downtown Association, so I'll just speak to this quickly. We did do a tour with the representative of the Downtown Association for this particular project. There was some early concern around potential infrastructure disruption associated with this project. This particular project, it's nominal and has been built into the project. It's just the removal of some paving stones and their restoration. We did look at a potential future project that would see a sidewalk disruption. So 2 things. One, this is here for council to choose to endorse or not. The recommendation is to endorse it. It's a great project that fits in with what we're doing in Spirit Center there, the whole square, lighting the trees along the way. And they have taken care of the infrastructure restoration as part of the grant process and the capital project. But we're going to take to PABCOM some kind of policy that clearly gives staff direction on situations like this about the way that infrastructure needs to be either protected or restored. And as I explained to the Downtown Association, you know, if we end up with disrupted infrastructure, a sidewalk blown out or a cut over through a road or whatever, if it's not in the grant process, then you're actually putting costs into the rest of the ratepayers for that project. So we need to have some policy where the guidance is get the infrastructure restoration as part of the grant application. Failing that, then, you know, council's going to have to make a deliberation. If they've got it in the grant application, it's going to be repaired to some kind of standard, then the city manager and others can deal with it. So the recommendation for this one is that council would approve a letter of support. And as I say, it fits with all the things that we're doing around Spirit Square. Okay. Anyone wish to make a motion to that effect? Councillor Runge, so moved. Seconder, Councillor Goulet. Questions or comments? On the motion, all in favor? Sorry, anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, that motion has passed. Okay, and then the next is to the Farmers Market Nutrition Coupon. And it was simply a request for us to send a thank you letter. Okay, Councillor Goulet. So moving it? Yeah, okay, and Councillor Paul, okay. Any questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none, then I would ask if anyone's in opposition. Okay, that motion has passed. So then moving on to bylaws. Bylaw 1899, South Quesnel Business Improvement Association levy, 3rd reading. Mover, Councillor Rudenberg, Councillor Runge, second. Anyone in opposition? Motion's passed unanimously. Bylaw 1900, Quesnel Downtown Business Improvement Association levy, final adoption. Councillor Runge, so moved. Seconded. Councillor Paul. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion has passed unanimously. And then bylaw 1908, outdoor cafe. Yes.
Sorry, I see that I made an error on number 3. I put first and second, but Tanya's report says first, second, and third.
Okay, thank you. So first, second, third of the outdoor cafe amendment. Motion, Councillor Rudenberg, Councillor Elliott. Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, that motion has carried unanimously. No changes to upcoming meeting schedule or committee appointments, any announcements or future events? Councillor Runge.
I'm sorry, trying to move my mouse. I need to touch it with my finger. Anyway, I just want to announce that the QDA Downtown Association has a walk, talk, shop event, April 22nd to 24th. For enhancing what's going on downtown. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any others? Okay, seeing none, then I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Elliott, Councillor Runge, and of course, council members, please do stay on. We have a meeting after this. Everybody else will be leaving the meeting. So we'll just take a short recess until we make sure that everything's clear.